Ari, we get the first monster matchup of 2024 when Georgia goes to Alabama. And man, it's not Kirby Smart versus Nick Saban anymore, but it is still best of the best talent-wise against the best of the best talent-wise. I cannot wait for this game.
And it's actually perfect that you get all of week 5 Saturday day to build up to it. Like, I'm so happy that it's not at 3:30 or 12. I'm happy this is at night, and I'm happy that we get to react to it immediately on our live show. Like, it's going to be a banger in Tuscaloosa. And like, honestly speaking, when I was doing the bubble watch today after the week 4 games, Andy, I really struggle with this because there are so many SEC teams right now who are expecting to or in a position to make the playoff this year. And what to do with all these SEC teams is really difficult. And I found myself moving Alabama down to the last 4 in, like to the 8 or 9 spot, because eventually teams are going to start beating each other. They haven't played yet. And I guess that was a prediction that Georgia was going to win. But now that I'm on the show right now, I don't.
So I want to ask you, why Alabama and not Georgia? Why bring Alabama down and not Georgia? Because the last time we saw Alabama, they looked great. The last time we saw Georgia, they struggled against Kentucky.
I think the reason why is because it's a projection, and I just went with the who's going to be the favorite in the game, and Georgia's laying 3 points on the road. So, like, I don't know that I feel great about it. I actually think that Alabama has a really, really good shot to win this football game, and I actually find that getting points here is actually attractive. But also, too, knowing that this is a week-to-week thing, Georgia is still the higher-ranked team in my poll, a team that I'm not going to just give up on because they had a really rough game against Kentucky last week. But here's the thing. This is going to be one of the games of the year, and I absolutely 100% think that Alabama can win.
So let's talk about what each team needs to do to win, because I think for Georgia, what we need to see from them, I think Kentucky exposed this in that game that Georgia just eked out. Georgia doesn't have any downfield playmakers that scare you like Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers scared people last year. And like when Alabama beat Georgia in the SEC championship game last year, it's because those guys were banged up. Like they didn't have that capability to beat you down the field, to scare you down the field. It feels like the same thing now. And this is a very similar Alabama defense. Like Caleb Downs is gone, Keon Sabb is in, but it's a lot of the same guys and a lot of the same Georgia offensive players, except the 2 that are the most dangerous are not there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have a realistic conversation about whether or not the Kentucky game was a symptom of an ailment that's going to continue to have symptoms down the line, or if it was just one of those games where they didn't show up and they were tired and didn't play well and whatever, and, you know, walked through and went through the motions. Because, you know, good teams do that sometimes. Like, how do you diagnose what happened in Lexington? And I think that there is a legitimate question of, like, is Georgia's offense good enough this year? Like, you can say that with a straight face. But then on the other hand, you've drilled into my brain for the past 2 months the Kirby Smart speeches, and I cannot imagine the intensity of what's going on in Athens, especially considering the fact of what happened in the SEC championship game last year. This is not a win or lose and go home type scenario. Whoever loses this game is still going to be very much alive in the college football playoff race. But I can't imagine that Alabama's not going to get Georgia's best, most amazing effort. And when Georgia is at its best, like, it's hard to pick them to lose.
Well, and let's talk about what Georgia can do better in this game than against Kentucky. That you can look at it through a lens of Alabama. So remember, Alabama played USF, and USF was playing with Alabama for the first 3 quarters because Alabama's starting offensive tackles were both out in that game. And they put Pritchett in the 4th quarter. The Proctor didn't play, but they put Pritchett in the 4th quarter, and all of a sudden everything magically got better. Georgia against Kentucky lost Tate Ratledge, maybe the best guard in the country, one of the best guards in the country. Suddenly, Georgia's offensive line did not look as invincible as it usually does. And it hasn't been completely dominant all season. But they lose Tate Ratledge. Now, Micah Morris has played quite a bit. But the thing is, this 5 had not played together all that much. Now they've had 2 weeks to practice together. I would suspect you will get a much better, cleaner performance out of the Georgia offensive line now that that group has worked together more. And I think you saw, like with Alabama, is the same thing. It was a group that had not worked together very much, didn't look good. All of a sudden, you get the guys that have worked together, and everything magically looks better. I think you'll get the same thing out of Georgia this week.
Yeah, well, if that happens, then it's kind of hard to pick against them. But then on the other hand, you and I were in Madison a few weeks ago, last weekend, I should say, and Alabama looks very explosive. Jalen Milroe looks like a hell of a lot better than he's been in the past. Their defense is still very good. This is a very difficult game to get a read on, because on one hand, it's like, you know, that meme of the basketball player who's just like, I can't remember who it was, but like, you
it's Alonzo Mourning. He's like, yeah, that's kind of a good point.
Yeah. It's like, you know, it's just like I could hear a case for either of these teams to win and agree with it.
Well, and let me give you another case. And look, I've already made the case for Alabama to win, that they have more explosive downfield threats on offense, that the defense is very similar to last year and you know, locked up Georgia in the SEC championship game. And Georgia is probably as dynamic or less dynamic than that group that played in the SEC championship game last year. So that's my case for Alabama to win this game. My case for Georgia to win this game, I just mentioned the offensive line being better because they've had a chance to play together and practice together. But also, as good as Jalen Milroe has been, he's not seen a defense like this. So does Jalen Milroe suddenly look like the Jalen Milroe from the Rose Bowl against that Michigan defense?
Mm-hmm.
Or is he as dynamic as we saw in the Wisconsin game? That's the question that Kalen Deboer and Jalen Milroe have to answer, because this is what you have to be able to beat, because it's not just Georgia. Like, Alabama's going to have to play good teams the rest of the year. If Alabama would like to win the national title, they're going to have to be able to do this against a Georgia or a Texas or an Ohio State. If they want to win the SEC title, they probably have to do this against a Texas. They're going to have to do it against a Tennessee that has an incredible defensive line. Like, they have to figure out how to beat teams like this. And you need to get the same Jalen Milroe that you got against Wisconsin against those defenses. And at this point, we don't know, because we haven't seen him play one yet. So we'll find out.
Yeah. Also, too, we were pretty deep into this video before we bring it up, but like, we do have to mention that this is like the Kalen Deboer coming out party, right? Like, there's no Nick Saban here. There is a new coach. We think Alabama's really good. We have analyzed and broken down Alabama this year in the same regard that we would have, you know, in terms of national championship potential and playoff seeding and all this stuff. But like, you have a fan base that is used to winning this game more often than not. Yeah. You're at home. This is your first real welcome to the SEC as the Alabama head coach. How Kalen Deboer draws up the game plan with both teams coming off of a bye week. How this team looks, how sharp it is, how equipped it is to compete with a team like Georgia, I think goes a long way into helping us understand what Alabama is going to be in the new era of no Nick Saban around. You know, I know coach stories are secondary a lot of the time, but I think this is a really important situation for their new head coach.
Absolutely. And look, everybody who told us, and I think you were one of them, Ari, that a 12-team playoff would devalue the regular season. Look at what we're getting in week freaking 5. And there's going to be more of this. This is just the start.
This, do you? You don't want to do this.
We're not doing this. This video is done. We're not doing this because I'm right. And this proves it. What a game we have. And it's just the beginning.